The next thing that we can look at in terms of differences between the types of polymers are how the monomers are connected to each other. So we have what are known as addition polymers versus condensation polymers. The difference here is not as obvious. So in an addition polymer, as the name suggests, actually in both of these, we're going to be adding successive monomers to the end of the growing polymer chain. However, in an addition polymerization, we don't lose, when we add that next monomer to it, we don't lose any molecule or fragment when we stick that on the end. In a condensation polymerization, however, when we add a successive monomer to the end of the polymer chain, we do lose either a small molecule or a fragment that's released on adding that or making the polymer chain, a little bit longer. There are several types of addition, several examples of addition polymerization and the monomers that are used. And then there's also some condensation ones that we'll see as well. So let's take a look at a few of these. All right, so here we have an example of what's known as a vinyl or a vinyl monomer. So we have a carbon double bonded to another carbon. We have H's on each of them, except up here we have an X. And what that X means that it can be different depending on the monomer involved. And identifies, or it allows us to differentiate one vinyl monomer from the other one. So if that X is simply an H, there'll be an H up here. Well, that means that's just ethene or ethylene. And we end up with a polymer called polyethylene or polyethylene, PE, and that's used in making packaging, storage bags, all sorts of different applications. If that X group up here, which we refer to as a pendant group, if that's a methyl or a CH3, so C and 3 H's up here, then that's a propylene monomer. So we call that a polypropylene polymer. So that's used in things like rope, carpet, tote bags, stuff like that. And then again, changing what that X is allows that the resulting polymer to be different. So if the X now is this this benzene ring, we end up with styrene as the vinyl monomer. So if we stick a bunch of them together, we end up with polystyrene. And obviously that's used in, food packaging, insulation, foam, etc. If the pendant group here is a chlorine, we end up with vinyl chloride. So if we stick them together, we end up with polyvinyl chloride or PVC. And obviously that's used in things like pipes, boots, jacketing, etc. And then if that up here is a C triple bonded to an N, well, that's the acrylonitrile that we saw previously. So we end up with these PANs used in sails, concrete reinforcement, etc. So all of these examples here, right, they're all in this table. All of these would represent what this X is on the vinyl monomer. And when you stick them together, just add one to the next, and you end up with your addition polymer that has a whole host of different uses. That is different than in a condensation polymerization. So here we see some examples of the other type of polymerization, which is condensation polymerization. So in this type, when a monomer is added to the growing polymer, a small molecule is usually released, and that molecule is not always, but it's typically going to be water, H2O, that gets released. So for example, here we have this molecule called terephthalic acid up here on the left side, and then that reacts with ethylene glycol. So this is like a B, sort of a co-polymerization alternating example, and we end up losing an O and an H and an H. So two H's and an O produce H2O, and then whatever remains, we're just going to stick them together via this bond here, and that should look familiar. That's an ester bond. So this is actually an example of a polyester, because we have lots of these ester bonds that link these AB fragments together. And this specifically is polyethylene terephthalate, which are your PET polyethylene terephthalate. That's the name for that particular polymer. Here, the one underneath, we have this monomer called bisphenol A, and we have several of these linked together. Again, we can release a water molecule as they're stuck together, and we end up making different types of polycarbonates as a result of that. Underneath the third example, we have this molecule, which is an amine. Specifically, it's a diamine, meaning there are two amine groups present. We react that with this thing called adipic acid, and we end up losing again an H, an O, and an H, right? That gives you water being released. And the bond now that connects one fragment to another one is this bond here. That's an amide bond. Okay, so we end up making a polyamide or a polyamide. In this case, nylon is the example that we made. So nylon is a polyamide. An example of that type of polymer. And the last one we have here is, again, we have a derivative of benzene. There's our benzene ring in the middle, makes it aromatic. We have another molecule here, which is some sort of a carboxylic acid. This can react. We end up losing water again. So an H, this is wrong. It should be an O and an H. We end up losing an H and two H's. That gives us water being released. And again, we have, this is a typo, C, should be C over here. So that's another amide bond. And this is a different product called Nomex. So the point here is in all of these, we have monomers that are added, and when they're stuck onto the growing chain, a small molecule, usually water, is released. That makes it a condensation type of polymerization.